Snow drifted down in slow, deliberate spirals, as if the heavens themselves mourned the desolation of Dravengard. The gorge was silent except for the wind, which whispered secrets across the frozen rocks, its song lost among the bones of the fallen. Every step Kaelen Thorn took was met with the crunch of snow and the low groan of ancient ice shifting beneath his boots. He moved like a man hunted, though none pursued him, at least none that could be seen. Wrapped in a weather-beaten cloak of blackened leather and fur, Kaelin's frame bore the weight of scars both visible and buried deep within. His armor, etched with strange runes and scars from a dozen wars, spoke of survival, not pride. A heavy sword hung at his hip, its grip worn smooth by years of use. But the object that drew the most attention, if there had been any to see, was the pendant at his chest. The rune of kin fire, a disk of obsidian etched with a burning mark that pulsed softly with warmth even in the bitter cold. Kaelen paused at the cliff's edge, his breath steaming in the frigid air. From here, the view stretched down into the Nargel Gorge, a corridor of jagged stone and shadow that had once been a trade route, now abandoned since the Aldrak descended from the stars. The invaders were not beasts of flesh, but chitin and cold logic, harvesting worlds like grain. They had no need for negotiation, only obedience or extinction. Behind him, nothing stirred. He was alone, sent ahead of the main resistance column to scout what remained of the old Frostwatch post. The last signal from the garrison had been 2 weeks ago, cut off mid-broadcast by static and screams. He descended carefully, the wind clawing at his cloak. The ice here was different, older, touched by something deeper than winter. Strange shapes moved beneath its surface, but only when Kaelen wasn't looking directly at them. He shook the thought from his mind and pressed on. The last thing he needed now was paranoia. Midway through the gorge, he found them. Bodies. Dozens of them. Some were half-buried, arms reaching skyward as if clawing for salvation. Others were frozen mid-run, faces twisted in terror, their skin stretched taut by frost. But it wasn't the cold that had killed them. Claw marks. Deep, precise. Something massive and not Aldrak. Kaelen crouched beside a corpse, brushing snow from its chest plate. The insignia confirmed it. Captain Rimar's unit. These were Frostwatch's defenders. Then the silence cracked. It wasn't a sound, more a presence. A pressure, low and vast, like a mountain exhaling beneath the earth. The ground trembled. Snow sloughed off the cliffs above. A shadow passed over Kaelen before he could move. He rolled, drawing his blade in one fluid motion, eyes scanning the gorge walls. Nothing. Then he looked forward. It emerged from the storm like a nightmare birthed from legend. Easily 20 feet tall at the shoulder, covered in thick, silvery fur that caught the light like polished frost. Its paws were the size of small carts, claws curved and black like obsidian. 2 great horns arched from its skull, and beneath them, glowing eyes of unnatural blue stared directly into him. Its mouth opened in a snarl, revealing rows of dagger-long teeth. The growl that followed shook Kaelin's bones more than his ears. He braced himself, heart hammering. This was no Aldrak construct, no war beast from across the stars. This was something older. The Varaloth, myths told to scare children, beasts said to sleep beneath the mountains, stirred only in times of great change or cataclysm. They devoured armies, they said, ate gods. Kaelen didn't believe in gods anymore, but he believed in death, and it was coming for him. He didn't run. He didn't shout. He simply lowered his stance, sword ready, eyes locked on the creature. If this was where it ended, he would meet it like a thorn, head high, blade drawn. The beast lunged. No, it didn't. It stepped forward. Once. Twice. And stopped. Its nose twitched, inhaling. Kaelen's grip tightened on a hilt. The rune of kin fire against his chest began to glow, not fiercely, but with a steady, rhythmic warmth. He could feel it pulsing in time with his heart. The creature's eyes widened, pupils contracting. It took a single, shuddering breath. Then, to Kaelen's disbelief, it lowered its massive head and bowed. The sword remained in Kaelen's hand, unmoving. He blinked, half expecting a trap, a sudden lunge, but nothing came. The creature held still, its breathing deep and resonant like the bellows of an ancient forge. He stepped forward once, carefully. The beast didn't flinch. "What are you?" Kaelen muttered. A sound echoed in his skull. Not a word, but a feeling. Recognition. Kinship. Memory older than language. Fire. Steel. Blood on snow. A face like his, long dead. A voice calling, "Rise, Flamebearer." He stumbled back, the visions swirling through his mind like smoke. This wasn't just a monster. It knew him, or something within him. The rune blazed brighter. The Varaloth growled, not in threat, but in resonance. It was responding to the artifact. To him, a gust of wind swept the gorge, clearing the last veil of snow from the landscape. From this vantage, Kaelen could see beyond the curve of the pass, to where a great host marched in the distance. The Aldrak, columns of black metal and fire, drawing closer every hour. If they passed through Nargil, they would reach the Heartlands. There would be no stopping them. Kaelen looked again at the creature, now sitting, watching him with the calmness of a soldier awaiting command. The rune of kin fire was no mere relic. It was a key, a call, and he had answered it, even without knowing. He sheathed his blade. "Can you understand me?" he asked, voice rough from the cold. A low rumble. Not quite a yes, but not a no either. He stepped forward and placed his palm on the creature's forehead. The fur was coarse, cold, and pulsing faintly with energy. "I don't know what you are," Kaelen whispered, "but if you've come to help, we ride." The Varaloth stood to its full height, towering above him, but no longer menacing. A ridge of bone and fur at its back formed something almost like a saddle, natural armor that had once borne riders, perhaps long ago. Kaelen climbed. As he settled into place, the rune pulsed once more. And this time, he felt the world shift beneath them. The Varaloth reared back, loosing a roar that cracked the ice and sent flocks of pale birds scattering into the sky. The sound echoed for miles, a sound that had not been heard in centuries. Kaelen didn't look back. His path was clear now. He wasn't just a scout. Not anymore. He was the last Flamebearer, and the beast beneath him had not come to devour. It had come to serve. The Varaloth moved like a storm given form, fluid yet devastating, swift despite its mountainous size. Its claws barely kissed the snow, each step a thunderous declaration against the silence of the gorge. Kaelen clung to the ridge of bone along its spine, knees braced, fingers gripping for slick with frost. The wind howled against him, biting into the seams of his armor, but his thoughts burned hotter than the cold. He was no longer alone. That knowledge sat heavy and strange in his chest. As they climbed the ridge toward the upper mouth of the gorge, Kaelen's mind raced with questions he dared not voice. The beast, no, the Varaloth, responded to the rune of kin fire. That meant the pendant wasn't merely a relic of his house, as he'd been told. It was something far older, tied to powers buried by time and empire. And if the Varaloth bowed to it, what else might? The resistance would need answers. But more immediately, they needed a weapon. And now he had one. An apex predator of legend beneath him. A creature whose presence alone shifted the balance of fear. Snow thinned as the terrain leveled out. Ahead, a ruined watchtower jutted from a slope of shattered rock. Its top was half collapsed, buried under fallen stone and frost, but its beacon platform still stood. Kaelen tapped the Varaloth's side gently. "There," he murmured. The beast rumbled in acknowledgement and padded forward. As they neared the structure, Kaelen slid down, landing lightly in the snow. His knees ached from the strain of the ride, but he ignored the pain and approached the beacon's base. A rusted ladder led to the platform. He climbed. From the summit, the valley stretched endlessly westward, and in the distance, closer now, moved the Aldrak, massive in number. Their war machines floated like black leviathans over the snow, flanked by jagged walkers and long lines of soldier drones. A march of extinction made orderly. Kaelen withdrew the long-range lens from his belt and focused in. At the center of the formation stood a monolith of gleaming black alloy, the Heart Forge, the Aldrak's mobile control nexus. Every drone and machine received its commands from it. Destroying it wouldn't stop the war, but it would cut the nerve for this column. Give the resistance time. Time enough to rally. Or flee. He climbed back down and found the Varaloth watching him, eerily still. Not like a beast, but a guardian awaiting instruction. "I need to reach them," Kaelen said aloud, though he wasn't sure the creature understood words. "Strike the forge. Shatter their line." A low growl echoed in the Varaloth's throat. Agreement or recognition, he couldn't tell. He touched the rune again. It pulsed warmly like a second heartbeat. A voice rose in his mind. Not language, not a thought, but a concept. Bond. The beast stepped forward and lowered itself once more. Kaelen mounted. No more scouting. No more hiding. The hunt began. They crossed the open tundra by dusk, skirting frozen ridges and deep gullies, always moving, always silent. Once, a drone patrol passed overhead, but the Varaloth crouched low and covered them in its shadow. It did not fear them. It simply chose not to waste a moment. As they neared the edge of a shallow valley, Kaelen heard a new sound. Steel clashing, shouting, the sharp pulse of directed energy weapons. He urged the Varaloth to slow. Down below, a resistance unit fought for its life. 20 at most, trapped behind the remains of a downed crawler, pinned by 2 squads of Aldrak soldier drones and a hovering scout platform. Red pulses cut through the snow, and one of the humans fell with a scream. Kaelen didn't hesitate. The Varaloth didn't wait for orders. It exploded down the slope like an avalanche. Snow flew in all directions. Drones turned too late. Kaelen shouted as they crashed into the line. The beast's claws tore through armor like parchment, hurling machines aside with the strength of a siege engine. One drone aimed a plasma lance. Kaelen leaned from the Varaloth's side, swung his blade, and split it down the center. Sparks flew. He was already moving to the next. The scout platform tried to ascend, but the Varaloth leapt, jaws crushing its thruster array. It came down hard, crumpling with the platform in its maw. Then silence. The resistance fighters stared, stunned, weapons slack. Kaelen slid off the Varaloth's back and approached. "Commander Thorn," one of the soldiers gasped, recognizing the insignia on his armor. "Report," Kaelen barked. "How many left? Where are you headed?" "Retreating from Vale Post. Cut off. Heading for the old ice line fallback. We didn't expect." The man's eyes flicked to the Varaloth. "That." Kaelen stepped forward, voice low. "The Aldrak are moving toward the Heartlands. We're going to stop them. You're coming with me." The soldier hesitated. With that, Kaelen looked back at the Varaloth. It was cleaning a wound on its shoulder, pale blood mixing with the snow. "It's not a monster," he said quietly. "It's a weapon. And right now, it's ours." The soldiers gathered what gear they could. Injured were lifted onto salvage sleds. The group moved quickly, following the Varaloth across the basin. As night fell, Kaelen kept to its flank, every sense alert. Later, by the light of a small, concealed fire, he sat with his back to the beast, watching the flames flicker in its eyes. "You knew me," he said aloud. "Not just me. My bloodline. My house. Flamebearer." The rune warmed. A memory returned. His father's final words before the last siege at White Flame Hold. "Never forget who you are, Kael. There's fire in your veins, older than the stars. That pendant isn't just our sigil. It's a summons. One day, something will answer." He hadn't believed him. Until now. The wind stirred. The Varaloth lifted its head. Kaelen followed its gaze. In the distance, beyond the ridges, the sky burned with unnatural light. The Aldrak were beginning their assault. Kaelen stood, drawing his blade, the fire reflecting in its steel. He turned to the soldiers behind him, hardened faces, scarred and silent. They had seen what marched against them. They knew the odds. But now they had something else. Not hope. Resolve. Kaelen climbed back atop the Varaloth. "Tomorrow," he said, voice hard, "we break the heart of their column. We burn their forge. And if we die," he looked down at the beast, "we die with fire at our heels." The Varaloth growled in assent. The soldiers rose. They would not wait to be hunted. They would become the hunters. Snowdrifts melted beneath the weight of their passage. The Varaloth moved without hesitation, its massive frame weaving between jagged ice spires and ancient crevasses as if it had tread this land since time began. Kaelen rode with his back straight, sword strapped to his side, eyes focused on the glowing horizon where the Aldrak's heart forge loomed. Behind them, the remnants of the resistance unit, no more than a dozen now, pressed forward, their silence sharpened not by fear, but by a sense of fate hardening around them. Kaelen knew this would be their final strike. Not just a battle, but the moment their entire cause bent toward. The Heartforge wasn't merely a machine. It was the brain of the invasion, a grotesque melding of synthetic intellect and conquest programming. The Aldrak didn't fear death, not as humans did. They calculated, adapted, evolved. Only by burning out their core could the tide be stemmed, and even then, only briefly. But that moment of breath could mean everything. He had felt it during the night, in dreams sparked by the rune. Flickering visions of the ancient blood bond, his ancestors riding these beasts across dead worlds, wielding flame and thunder against dark tides. The rune had not simply called the Varaloth. It had awakened a forgotten link, a pact woven into the marrow of his line. And now, in the shadow of the Heartforge, that bond would be tested. The sun cracked over the peaks, just as they reached the final rise before the forge. The landscape below was warped by heat and industry. What had once been a glacier now lay covered in obsidian plating, smooth and glistening like frozen oil. Towering pylons arced energy from tip to base, feeding a central pillar that pulsed with deep crimson light. Around it, drones moved in rigid formation, weapons bristling, scanners sweeping. Kaelen dismounted and signaled for the others to take cover behind the rocks. "We won't get another chance," he said, kneeling beside the resistance captain, a woman named Talon whose face bore an old burn scar, testimony to a life of battle survived. "This is it. We drive straight for the forge, take out the pillar." "And then what?" she asked, voice like gravel. "We're a dozen soldiers and a beast. They have a fortress." Kaelen met her gaze. "We don't need to win a siege. We need to light a fire they'll never forget." Talon glanced past him to the Varaloth, who stood still at the ridge's crest, wind tugging at its fur. "Then let's make it burn." The plan was suicidal. They would strike from the ridge, use the Varaloth's charge to crack the outer line, push deep, and deliver Kaelen to the base of the Heartforge. The beast would provide the distraction. The soldiers would follow close, target command relays and pylons. If Kaelen could reach the forge's core and activate the rune, he believed, hoped, he could collapse it from within. There were no arguments. Everyone knew what was at stake, and none of them had anything left to lose. Kaelen climbed once more onto the Varaloth's back. It turned its head slightly, one ice blue eye fixing on him. No words passed between them, but the bond tightened. There was a grim understanding there. This would be the end of something. With a silent motion, they launched. Snow blasted from their wake as the Varaloth charged down the slope. The Aldrak responded instantly. Alarms flared, drones spun and locked on. Turrets unfolded from hidden caches. Bolts of energy screamed through the air, scorching the stone and snow alike. But the Varaloth was faster. Kaelen leaned low, sword unsheathed, the rune blazing against his chest. The beast tore through the first line of drones like wind through paper. Limbs flew. Circuits sparked and died. Resistance fighters poured in behind them, firing from behind shattered barricades, hurling charges, moving like a single pulse of fury. They made it to the second ring, where the ground shifted beneath their feet. The Aldrak had buried defense plates, shifting, grinding mechanisms that emerged like jagged black teeth. One surged up before them, but the Varaloth leapt, landing hard on the other side, claws skidding across the surface. Kaelen swung wide, cutting through two drones that had risen to flank. Sparks burst into the cold air, trailing smoke. He could see it now. The forge's base, a twisted cluster of black columns and radiant glyphs. It pulsed like a heart, each beat releasing another wave of drone command signals. Too fast to think. They had to move. A drone sentinel dropped from above, massive and angular, its limbs ending in burning plasma hooks. It swung at Kaelen midair. The Varaloth twisted, catching the hook between its jaws and wrenching it sideways. Kaelen leapt, using the momentum to flip from the beast's back and land atop the sentinel's chassis. He plunged his blade deep into the control cortex, riding the creature down as it convulsed and died. The soldiers fought savagely now. Talon led a group around a pylon, setting charges while laying down suppressing fire. One of the men, Vesh, the youngest, took a hit to the leg, but kept moving, dragging himself to safety while reloading. Kaelen sprinted for the forge's core. The rune burned hotter than ever, like molten fire against his chest. As he approached, the glyphs along the pillar flared in response. The Aldrak systems recognized the signal, but not the wielder. Confusion spread through the drone network. Hesitation, brief but critical. He placed his palm against the black alloy, the rune fully exposed. Pain exploded through him. Not physical, but ancestral. Memory, grief, fury, waves of sensation not his own. The forge resisted, screamed through thousands of voices at once. He screamed back. Flamebearer, the runes said, not in sound but in essence. Kaelen pushed. The glyphs shattered in sequence, light flickering and dying. Energy surged, uncontained now, licking up the structure like wildfire. The Heartforge buckled inward with a groan that echoed through the valley. Kaelen stumbled back as the core imploded, heat and force hurling him across the stone. He crashed hard but rolled to his feet, coughing. The forge collapsed behind him, a dying god-made machine. The drones froze mid-motion. All around them, Aldrak constructs halted, movements erratic, sensor lights dimming. One by one, they fell. Silence. Then the mountain groaned again, deeper this time. Not the forge, the land beneath it. Moo! Kaelen shouted, his voice raw. Everyone now. Talon grabbed the wounded, her team rushing toward the upper slope. Kaelen ran for the Varaloth, who stood watching the forge with an unreadable gaze. The earth split where the forge had stood. Energy had not simply powered the structure. It had bored into the crust, corrupted it. Now it ruptured, steam and fire billowing upward, a volcanic plume spreading in all directions. The Varaloth crouched. Kaelen climbed. They ran. Behind them, the world burned. The world was still burning when the survivors reached the ridge. Black smoke clawed at the sky, veiling the sun in a sickly orange hue. Ash fell like snow across the war-torn slopes, blanketing the dead machines and scorched earth with a pale funeral shroud. Kaelen stood beside the Varaloth, one hand resting against its flank, his breathing shallow and uneven. Every muscle in his body ached. His thoughts swirled like the smoke below, tangled with loss, victory, and something more ancient, something awakening. They had done what no other resistance had achieved in 2 decades. They had silenced an Aldrak Heartforge. For the first time since the machines descended from the void, one of their minds had been broken. But even victory carried weight. Talon limped toward him, her arm slung in a makeshift bandage of scorched cloth. Blood seeped through the fabric, but her eyes were sharp. "You still breathing, Flamebearer?" Kaelen offered a tired smirk. "Barely." She stopped beside him, looking down into the smoking crater where the forge had once stood. The others gathered slowly, their numbers halved again by the assault. Vesh had not survived. Neither had 3 others Kaelen hadn't had time to learn names for. He would carry that with him. The Varaloth shifted beneath his hand. Its blue eyes were fixed on the horizon, ears twitching as though hearing something no human could. Kaelen followed its gaze. Far in the distance, beyond the craggy cliffs and ash-choked valleys, lights flickered, brief, staccato pulses like the dying cries of a fractured network. The Aldrak had felt the loss. Others would come. How long before they regroup? Talon asked. Kaelen exhaled slowly. "Depends how deep we cut. If we severed only a relay, days. If we hit something older, something core, they'll send everything." Talon nodded, as if she had expected nothing less. "Then we need to be gone by nightfall. This place will be swarming." Kaelen didn't move. His hand remained on the Varaloth's fur. The rune no longer glowed, but he could feel it deep inside him now, woven into the rhythm of his heartbeat. It had changed him. Not just the bond, not just the flame. It had given him memory. A living history buried in blood and silence. He had seen fragments during the collapse. Ancestral warriors cloaked in starlight, riding beasts through broken skies, wielding fire against the Aldrak on countless worlds. And always the Varaloth beside them, never subservient, never tamed, but bound by a shared purpose. He looked up at the beast, and for a long moment, they simply were 2 creatures from different worlds standing together on the edge of destruction. Kaelen had summoned the Varaloth not as a weapon, but as a call to something forgotten. And now, that memory would not let him rest. "I'm not going back to the Enclave," he said quietly. Talon didn't react immediately. She studied him, eyes narrowing. "You've done enough. You broke the forge, Kaelen. They'll sing about this long after we're bones." "I didn't break it," he said. "We did. And it's not over. That forge wasn't just a relay, it was a signal tower. It was listening. Listening to what?" "To us," he said, voice low. "Or maybe to the rune. Or the bond. Doesn't matter. They know now that something woke up. And they'll try to kill it before it spreads." Talon said nothing. She didn't have to. They both knew he was right. "I need to go north," Kaelen continued. "There's an old vault near the Scaline Ridge. We used to think it was just a ruin, pre-fall tech maybe. But I saw it. In the visions. It was a temple once. A place where the Flamebearers gathered, where they trained, where they kept the runes before they were scattered. There may be more there. More like me. More Varaloth." Talon folded her arms across her chest, jaw tight. "You're saying there are others?" Others who could do what you did. I don't know, but I can't not find out. The Varaloth let out a low rumble, not a growl, but a sound of agreement, like thunder waiting behind the mountains. Kaelen turned to it, placing his hand between its horns. The bond pulsed again, not with power this time, but with something deeper, trust. Talon finally sighed. Then you'll go. Alone. Kaelen looked over the ragged survivors. Take them back to the Enclave. Tell them to prepare. If the Forge was listening, others will be too. But if I can find what was lost, maybe we'll stand chance. She reached out, clasping his forearm in the old way. Then may your flame burn long, and your beast carry you true. He held her gaze. And may yours never be extinguished. They separated without ceremony. Words were no longer needed. These were people of action, hardened by loss and welded by necessity. By dusk, Kaelen was riding again. The snow turned blue in the fading light, the wind keening across the ridges like morning song. The Varaloth moved with steady confidence, weaving through the terrain as though following a map only it could read. Kaelen let it guide them. The rune thrummed beneath his skin, not as a burden, but as a compass. They crossed into the Deadlands by nightfall. Once a forest, the region had been razed by orbital strikes during the early waves of the invasion. Now, blackened stumps and glass soil stretched for miles. Ghostly ruins jutted from the frost like broken teeth. The Varaloth paused atop a hill, sniffing the air. Kaelen looked ahead. In the distance, a flicker of blue light pulsed once, then again. Not machine light. Something older. He urged the Varaloth forward. The ruins deepened as they descended. Stone arches partially buried in ice. Symbols worn to nubs by centuries of storm and silence. But here and there, he saw them. Shards of the same language etched into the rune, scorched into the stone like the residue of forgotten fire. The Varaloth stopped at one such glyph, pawing the ground before bowing its head. Kaelen dismounted and knelt, brushing snow aside until his fingers found the curve of a circular seal. A spiral, a flame, a doorway. He placed his palm upon it. The rune flared once more, and the ground shifted. Stone ground against stone, a hidden passage yawning open beneath them, exhaling warmth and dust. A wind pushed outward, not from the forge, but from something deeper. A voice without sound, a presence without form. Kaelen stepped inside, the Varaloth behind him. Below, in the dark, lights kindled, dim at first, then brighter. Along the walls, statues of armored warriors with flame-cradling gauntlets. Vaults sealed with crystal. Runes untouched by time. This was not just a temple. It was a beginning, and the flame had returned.